This is Wild Nevadacast. I'm Dave Santina in studio in PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada, and John Trent is with me. John Trent is the senior editor of news and features at the University of Nevada, Reno, and if you also listen to the PBS Reno Arts Podcast, this may be a familiar name because last week we were doing a PBS Reno Arts Podcast talking about a book that you'd written, and it turns out I find out you're an ultra runner and you're a trail guy and you're all over the place, and I thought, oh, well, we need to have you come back and do a Wild Nevadacast and talk about where you've been and what you love and why people should get out and explore. I think that would be really cool. So thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's good to be back.
So you've written a couple of books about running. You were fully committed to this. You've been the former president of the Western States 100 race, right? And you're still on their board, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're hardcore, one of those hardcore guys that does this stuff. And I just don't understand you guys, so I need to learn. So here we are. I want to find out about it. It's taken you all over the place, but just as an introduction, how did you get involved in running in general and then ultra running?
Yeah, so I started running when I was a teenager here in Reno. I watched the 1976 Olympics, got inspired. I was at Swope Middle School, started running. I was really lucky. There was a coach there by the name of Lyle Freeman, who was a PE teacher and also the cross country and track coach. And Coach Freeman was a really, kind of encouraging soul. And even though I wasn't very good, he didn't care if you were good or bad. He just liked having kids out to run. And so from Coach Freeman, I got a real love of running early on in my life. And so that's, so going to 2025, that'll be 49 years that I've been a runner.
Wow.
I've done that longer than anything in my life. So it's always been a passion to me. And then I matriculated to the dark side of ultra running. In about 1995, I was working as a reporter at the Reno Gazette-Journal. And I had covered the Western States 100. It's the world's, or it's the oldest 100-mile trail race in North America. Dates back to 1974, where you basically run from the site of Palisades, Tahoe, to Auburn, following this historic route that takes you through a lot of old settlements that go back to the 19th century. So I'd covered that race a few times. And I got an invitation from a runner from Reno, a contractor named Joe Brandenburg, who was 51 years old at the time. Joe, this was 1995, he said, hey, how would you like to come out and, be part of my crew, pace me, and maybe do a story about it? So I said, sure. And so I ended up pacing Joe that year, the final 38 miles. And it turned out, Dave, a story is okay, but when you have elements that turn it into a great story, it really grabs you. And that day, So here's this 51-year-old guy who seemed ancient to me.
Sure, yeah,
by the way.
Oh, 51, wow.
And he was competing at such a high level, he was running for the top 10 that day, and he finished in 9th place. And beyond that, maybe you've heard of a book called Born to Run. It's about the Tarahumara from Copper Canyon in Mexico.
Yes.
Some of the first trail runners ever. Christopher McDougall wrote a great, beautiful book about that, New York Times bestseller. So there were Tarahumara who were running that day as well. And Joe got into a couple of duels with some of these amazing runners who they ran in sandals, and they had sandals on, and they had the native kind of wear that the native people wore. And just being a part of a race where this 51-year-old guy is battling these great runners throughout the night and day, it turned me on to the sport. I could barely walk the next day. That was the longest I'd ever run, was 38 miles.
Wow.
But I was hooked. I wanted to find out more about it. And, 30 years later, here I am.
Amazing. So by chance, you are invited. This immediately strikes you, and now you've been doing it ever since. Is that right?
Yeah. So I paced Joe in 1995, and then you have to qualify to get into a lottery for Western States. So I had to run a qualifying race the next year. Ran a 50-mile race in 1996, and then was chosen to run Western States for the first time in 1997. And that was, they have a really lovely bronze belt buckle if you finish under 30 hours. Yeah, they have an even lovelier silver belt buckle if you finish under 24. hours, and I ran 24:01 in
wow.
1997. And from that, that spurred me on to want to continue to do the run, and then I became involved in putting Western States on as well.
Okay, and so just for the non-runners in the audience, when you say you paced somebody, you ran alongside them to motivate them or to give them sort of someone to chase, a rabbit or whatever. How do you describe a pace?
Yeah, that's, it depends on the runner. Some runners, they want you to be the cheerleader. So you're there, you jump in at a certain point, you lift their spirits, you talk to them. Some don't want to be talked to at all. They want it to be just quiet and they just want to have somebody there.
Okay.
Some prefer to have you run in front of them. When I was running Western States, I had a pacer by the name of Roland Martin, who was a real seminal figure in ultra running in Northern Nevada. Roland would run ahead of me, and he would challenge me to catch up to him.
Oh, wow.
And that would be, that's one way of, I prefer to more encourage and stay next to the runner and not really force them out of their comfort zone. So there's different styles, and basically you're there originally it was an idea of, you were kind of a safety runner, because when Western States, for example, first came about, runners would get so exhausted they'd start wandering off the trail.
Oh.
And then the organizer would be like, where are they? Where did they go?
And you're running 100 miles, so you have a lot of trail to get lost in.
Mm-hmm.
That could be really dangerous.
Yeah. So the safety runner, which turned into the pacer, the safety runner would be there to just make sure, like, hey, you're losing your mind. That's okay. We need to go straight here and don't go wandering off into this mine shaft.
Yeah. Well, that's a great idea. Good. It's great to have a pace. I appreciate that. That sounds like a great Wild Nevada style event when you're running through historical locations.
Oh, it's Western States. I mean, we see it all throughout Nevada too. These communities that no longer are, mining communities that, back in the 19th century during the silver rush for Nevada or the gold rush for California, where there were, hundreds, if not thousands of people living. And on the Western States Trail, there are these old outposts, places. They have these great evocative names: Last Chance, Deadwood, Michigan Bluff. These are places. Michigan Bluff, by the way, was a really, really thriving community at one point. It had, churches, schools, houses of ill repute, bars, all sorts of stuff. And so you run through on the Western States Trail, and a lot of these trail races, you run through these former settlements, and there's still like old mining equipment out there in some places.
Okay.
You can see, where there are some structures that are still standing. So you feel like, even though it's today, you're going back in time, and it's one of these kind of feelings that it's hard to shake once you've experienced it.
Yeah, and so you're running through history and making some personal history at the same time. Is this a trail that you're running? How do you follow along? It seems like 100 miles. There would probably be some opportunities to take the wrong turn.
There are, yeah. So you find out, especially over the hill, and basically Western States is held above and down into and above again the American River drainage, essentially. And there's a number of different forks of the American River. There's the North Fork, there's the Middle Fork, there's the Middle Fork of the North Fork of the American River. And so there's a bunch of different trails that you can go. And the Western States Trail essentially is the trail that was used. It goes back to the 1860s when there was silver discovered, and being extracted in Nevada, and then up into, above the area of Palisades, Tahoe, and into that mountain range. There were people finding some silver there, and they needed to have a way it was essentially a toll road at one point. And from this toll road is this trail now, which it's part of the historic register, and it's held at the beginning of it. You go through the Granite Chief Wilderness. So it goes through protected, federally protected wilderness areas where, when trees go down and the organizers have to get the trail going, you can't bring in like chainsaws, for example, into these protected areas. You have to bring in one of those old-fashioned, really long hand saws to clear the trail. So it has all these different aspects, and the trail nowadays is incredibly well marked. There's ribbon that's used. There are arrows that you put on the trail. And even with that, every once in a while, even with a pacer, runners do go off course.
Oh, man. Did you ever go off?
A couple of different times.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So good thing to have the help.
Always.
It's worth it.
Yes.
Okay. This trail, I presume that hikers can take at any time as well, right? This is obviously you probably have it blocked off for the race, but is it available to anyone who's interested in exploring?
Yeah, it is. It is a multi-use trail in that, you know, there's also equestrian and the Western States Trail goes to a point where the Pacific Crest Trail goes across it at one point. So, you know, there's usually a lot of hikers. There's a horse race, the Tevis Cup, which basically the Western States was born from. That dates back to 1955, where horse riders rode from Tahoe City all the way over to Auburn, and they brought this trail back because it had gone away. You know, the wild had, you know, once the silver rush had ended and those mining settlements kind of petered out, nobody went up there. But then in 1955, a guy by the name of Wendell Roby, who was a businessman in Auburn, he decided he wanted to ride his horse in under a day from the post office in Tahoe City. And he carried mail from Tahoe City and took it over to Auburn. And that kind of reopened that trail. Okay. So, yeah, so it's open year round. I would suggest to folks to remember that a good time of year is throughout the summer until you get like September. It gets a little buggy up there.
Oh, okay.
But June, July, August are great months to be up there for sure.
Okay. When do they normally run the Western States?
That's always on the fourth Saturday of every June. Yeah.
Okay. So plenty warm enough at that point. So, all right, you've done a lot of races. I mentioned Western States because you were the president of the board, but I was reading a little bit about your history with ultra running, and I see Quicksilver, Wasatch, San Diego, Zion, all these 100-mile races. And I think, man, you must really like to pound your feet and have sore legs. What kind of training do you have to do to run 100 miles?
That's always a great question because I think in the warped sensibility of an ultra runner, it doesn't seem like it's that much. But I think to the person who may not be acquainted with the sport, it does sound like a lot.
So does to me.
Yeah. And really, it's a matter of kind of callousing yourself and getting used to going out for long periods of time. You know, the phrase time on feet is really, really important. So it's not necessarily running throughout the whole time. It's not that you go out and you run 30 continuous miles. You go out and you have a 30-miler on the docket on a Saturday. And if there's a long, so you've been to Palisades, Tahoe, you know, you're down there in the village and you go up to high camp. That's a 3.5-mile climb to get up to high camp. You essentially hike that. You don't run it. You know, you start out, you hike it. And then once you get up there, it flattens out. As you go up and over the top, then you start running. So you pick out sections to run. And then if it gets too steep, too difficult, you walk. Although elite athletes in the sport, they'll run the whole thing. You know, to give you an example, like Western States' course record is 14 hours and 9 minutes by a runner named Jim Walmsley.
How fast is that? How many miles per hour is that?
Sub 9 minutes per mile.
What?
Yeah, it's so Jim Walmsley will run almost every step of that. But, you know, for the average person, it's more about breaking it up into digestible, manageable segments where you run for a while, you walk and you can eat. See, that's the other thing. You have to train your gut to be able to take in calories, because if you don't eat and drink, you're going to crater. You're just going to reach a low and you're not going to be able to work out of it. So ultra runners like to say ultra running is a great excuse for overeating. So you can just get out there, you can have a nice sandwich, you know, candy, gels, whatever it is, and you teach yourself over the course of several months to learn to be out there for a long time.
Okay, so you stepped onto one of the questions I was going to ask. What do you eat to get ready for something like this? How do you choose the food you're going to put in your body before and then during?
Yeah. I wish I could say it was real healthy. Maybe from the standpoint of some of these energy gels, you know, that you might take, there's probably some nutritional value in there. But for the most part, you know, both my daughters, who are both in their 30s now, they are both ultra runners as well. So they've grown up in the sport, and they always like to refer to the best ultra running food as gas station food.
Oh, really?
So it's chips, it's like gummy bears, Swedish fish, maybe a sandwich with like turkey and provolone is one of my favorites. Avocado, Greek yogurt it can give you a really nice boost. If you see, your crew and they hand you some Greek yogurt, avocado again is a great one. I love ginger ale. That helps not only, kind of give you something sparkly to drink, but also helps soothe the stomach a bit if you do have some gastrointestinal problems.
Okay.
And you figure out what works best for you. I've seen some runners who will have a bag of mashed potatoes.
Oh, wow.
And their crew will bring them a bag of mashed potatoes, and it's just like watching them eat Thanksgiving dinner. They just start pounding the mashed potatoes. But, when you think about it, it's complex carbohydrates.
Sure.
There's some starch in there. So there's some things that can help you. So it's a matter of what works best for you.
Okay, so everybody has kind of their own style. It's not like some of those races you see, those marathons where people all eat the same thing and drink the same thing as they go. This is that's a very personal choice, what you eat. So then when you're done, you finish 100 miles. What do you eat after? Can you even eat?
I would love to say you have that victory meal immediately afterwards. Yeah. Usually it takes you a few hours to kind of, you don't realize it at the time. But I've experienced this phenomenon now. I've run 1,800 100 milers total. You feel like, your system is still revved up, and your heart rate is still high. You feel like your body's still under stress. So it takes you maybe 3 or 4 hours. And then you're like, oh yeah, In-N-Out Burger sounds pretty good about now. Something like that. Usually, the woman who was the most recent president of Western States, a really good runner by the name of Diana Fitzpatrick. Diana tells the story of her poor husband. She finished Western States one year, and she had to have a chocolate milkshake. And Diana was a fast enough runner where, these races start at 5 a.m. And so she finished at midnight or 1 a.m, not much open. So her poor husband from Auburn had to drive around Auburn and find some, 24-hour, diner place to get her a chocolate milkshake, because that's what she had to have. Her craving was that had to be it.
Funny, but good job, husband. Well done. That's how you maintain a healthy relationship. Just do what she says.
You've married well when that happens, yes.
So you've been all over the West running these races. I'm wondering what places you've been to and what places you enjoyed and would go back to and would recommend to others.
Wasatch has always been one that's been close to my family's heart. I started, once my time running Western States had kind of come to a close, I still wanted to run hundreds. And Wasatch is almost as old as Western States. It goes back to the early 1980s. It's in the Wasatch Mountain Range, which is, for those who follow Nevada history, that's the one where, the gentleman, the Hastings cutoff gentleman who was leading the Donner Party in the wrong direction or had given them the wrong instructions, where they got horribly lost in the Wasatch Mountains. And, they had to fight through, just terrible conditions just to get through the Wasatch, let alone then down to get to the Great Basin and then, on to what befell them in the mountains nearby here. But Wasatch is a beautiful course. It's incredibly challenging. It's an old school kind of race. The same group of runners who put it on 40 years ago, still put it on today. Western States has a lot of sizzle to it. The best ultra runners in the world come and run Western States. Wasatch will tell you we're the exact opposite of that. It's more of an every man, every woman kind of race. They really embrace the fact that you're an average person. We love that about you, and we're going to help you finish the race. So Wasatch is a beautiful one. There's another one, Leadville in Colorado, which again dates back to the early 1980s. Leadville is in this incredibly beautiful town, a couple hours outside of Denver. It's what makes Leadville so challenging. There are mountains that you go up and then you go down. At Wasatch, Western States, Leadville is at 10,100 and I think it's 150 feet. That's the elevation of the start. You're never any lower than that the entire time.
Okay.
You go up to 12,000 feet or thereabouts and you run around there. Altitude is a big deal there, but it's a beautiful race. It's one of those races that's got this incredible history to it. And like a lot of ultra races, Dave, it has a story where there was mining involved. There was a special mineral that was extracted in the mountains around there. And then those mines came to a close in the 1980s, and the city or the town had to figure out a way to survive. And the way they did it is through, tourism. Not only just, they have like you won't believe this, but it's a great facility. They have the Mining Hall of Fame there.
Really?
And so, yeah, it's a great museum where you can find, all these different aspects of mining. And in addition to that, they created the 100-mile trail race. There's a 100-mile bike race. In July, they have a 50-mile race for mountain biking and running. They have a marathon in June. The town becomes repopulated with endurance athletes throughout the summer. And in a lot of ways, that has helped save that community. So that's what makes that race special is the guy who created it, Ken Klauber, who's still alive, he's in his 80s. He's a former miner. He helped save that town, and that's what you feel when you come in and you experience Leadville.
Oh, nice. So you would recommend visiting Leadville to anyone, hikers, maybe not ultra runners only, but anyone can go and enjoy it.
You'd love it. I mean, it is every place you look, east, west, north, south. There's a 14,000-foot peak that's just outside of that town. It's stunning how beautiful it is. Yeah, and there's fishing, there's camping, there's a great campground called Sugarloafing that's pretty inexpensive. It's a wonderful town just to hang out, and there's some nice little bakeries and coffee shops there as well.
Sounds incredible. Are there any races, 100-mile races within Nevada?
Not at the moment, and I've been following this for a long time. There's an endurance horse ride that's been held out of Virginia City for a long time. The endurance horse ride goes back to the late 1960s, I believe. Okay. Hopefully I'm right about that. And the dream has always been, but it's never quite come to fruition, to have a 100-mile race, that would kind of mimic the 100-mile horse ride in the Virginia City Highlands, take you over to the Carson Range. You can go up above Carson City and wind down. There is, I guess technically you could say and I guess it is all Nevada, actually. I take that back. The Tahoe Rim 100-miler, which is held in July. Okay. You start, and my good friend George Rees, who's the race director, is going to kill me for not realizing that's been around for a long time. But that's a great race. You start. He has the start now down in Carson City. You make your way up to the Tahoe Rim Trail and go up to Spooner Lake and Marlette Lake, and then over to Tunnel Creek, and then wind your way back down to Carson City. And that's a beautiful race in terms of seeing Lake Tahoe. For a second, I thought it went into California, but it doesn't. It's all Nevada.
Oh, okay.
And that's usually in July. It's tough. It's hotter than heck.
Sounds like
it's a tough race, but it's George Rees and his team. They do a phenomenal job of putting it on. And George, I'm sorry I didn't mention you right away.
George, forgive us. Forgive us. We know not what we do here. What's the name of that race again?
Is the Tahoe Rim Trail 100.
Okay, Tahoe Rim Trail 100. Check it out if you are interested in becoming. And this is an ultra running race.
And they also have, in addition to the 100-miler, they have he's going to have a 100K this year, and there's a 55K as well.
Okay, so as someone who is not an ultra runner and occasionally runs a little, I've just barely gotten started back into it. How does someone begin the journey to becoming an ultra runner if they're just curious about getting involved?
I think a big part of it is to feel like you're not alone. I mean, the ultra running community is a very welcoming and encouraging community, and that's something that I learned as I got involved. So, even though they talk about the loneliness of the long distance runner, and I think there's some poetry to that, and there's some truth to that, but I think, not only just feeling like, you want to try and get out there and do it, find some like-minded folks to share it with. There's a group that I'm a part of, the Silver State Striders. The Striders go back to the 1970s. There's a trail, there used to be a road racing and a trail running component to that. The trail running component, and there's also a junior Striders group. The trail running component, we have runs on Tuesday and Thursday nights. And so there's fast runners who show up, there's middle of the pack runners, and there's back of the pack runners. And we try to encourage everybody who comes out to, even if we have a 8-mile run on the docket, that you can have a 3 or 4 mile option. And then we all stand around ultra runners love to visit, trail runners love to visit. We stand around. Oh, how are you? My name's John. My favorite color, green. What's your favorite color? And get to know people, because I think that's what you need is like, not only just you go out and you learn about the discomfort and the commitment that's involved, but realizing that there are going to be people there, if you choose, who can be there with you to help you share the experience and maybe make it a little bit more enriching.
I've heard tell of the community of runners. Chris Orr from Wild Nevada on PBS Reno has often mentioned the community of running. And I know you've written a couple of books about running. One of them, the first one, Running Toward Life, Finding Community and Wisdom in the Distances We Run. I imagine that's inspired by the running community and your human connections with the people who are involved in this.
Yeah, the book is kind of a love letter to the people that I've met, the experiences that I've had that have helped change me. I think for the better. On most days, I think for the better. I don't know if the kind of running that I did before I met the community of ultra runners, I don't know if that running was as fulfilling as it is now. Because again, I think people were able to help me and encourage me. I mentioned Roland Martin earlier as a person who, Roland passed away a few years ago. He's a longtime Reno attorney who lived here. And he wasn't the most verbose man in the world. But I mean, if you were going to go off to a race like at Leadville and you asked him, he would just, he would show up there and help you. The training runs I went out on, it changed my whole perspective of our area, because Roland, having been an attorney, he had studied property records and who had owned what. And so you go out, say, like to run up around Pine Haven, above Collin Ranch, and you'd go out and run with Roland, and he would explain to you what Italian family, and obviously even before the Italian families, the Native American folks,
right.
The Native American community who had been he would explain from the beginning from the indigenous people to the Italian, landowners to today, that whole sort of evolution of who owned what and why it was important. Learning stuff like that is stuff that I feel incredibly lucky. And I think people who are around me, I always channel my inner Roland, and I'm like, yeah, we're on the Gaspari loop here. Did you know about this Gaspari family? They did this, that, or the other thing, or we'll be up on Peavine. Yeah, this is a rock that, the native people here, you can see like where they used to do all their grinding on their grindstone here, and things like that. So finding community and having these people share their experiences, makes you a better person. It opens your eyes in ways that I think as a road runner, I was just focused on pace and time and finish time. Now it's more about like, oh, who are you and why are you out here and this land that we're on? What does this all mean? How do we all come together?
A shared experience that you will all remember because you're all in the middle of doing something that's physically challenging, but it's a shared experience, so it does create that camaraderie, I think, right?
Totally.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's these are relationships, just to give you a quick story, so, I told you about when I ran 24:01, my first Western States. Next year, I didn't do very well. I had to drop out. I got hurt on the snow, because sometimes in June there can still be snow up there. And then I didn't get in 1999. And then in the year 2000, I'm running along and I trip on a rock and I go down hard. And it was just one of those moments, Dave, where I'm just like, I hate this.
Right.
I'm not accomplishing what I thought I could accomplish. And I'm down in the dust and I'm cursing, and I literally feel these hands come up behind me and lift me up, my armpits, and lift me up. And I turn and look, and there's this man that I've never met before in my life. He's got blue eyes and blonde hair. He's a little bit older than I am, and he said, "Hey, come on, just run with me a little bit. And, wipe it, you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine." And it turned out it was a man by the name of Scott Mills, who was, at the time he was in the Air Force. He's retired now. Scotty was a great and wise ultra runner who, it turned out, like, we ended up running 60 plus miles together that day, where we just found this incredible rhythm. And I was able to finish the race, easily broke 24 hours, and had just an incredible day. And if not for him literally lifting me up out of the dust and making sure I was okay, and then telling me, "Hey, it's going to be okay, just run with me a little bit." If not for that, I don't know if I'd be in the sport. And if all these experiences, if not for him.
Incredible. It's the people more than the sport that keeps you going.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
That's inspirational. Now you make me think about trying something like that. I'm not gonna get crazy. I might just start with a little, a nice simple jog and a few miles around the neighborhood, and then we'll see how I go after that. But thank you for telling me about it. It's fascinating to me, and I really enjoy hearing the stories, and also the sort of Wild Nevada complimentary content here about these locations for people to visit. I think that's part of the fun of this, is that you're also traveling a bit, you're seeing different places, and having memorable experiences. So thanks for coming back to talk more about it. I had no idea we'd get another half an hour out of just chatting about running, but it's really fun.
You had me at running, Dave. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
All right, but before we go, I want to remind everybody to watch Wild Nevada on PBS Reno via broadcast or live stream. Streaming rather, on pbsreno.org. Also with the YouTube channel that we have. And if you have a question about Wild Nevada, or maybe a comment or a suggestion, then send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. My thanks to John Trent, and thank you for listening to Wild Nevadacast.